I'm Zanele Morrison, your host and moderator for today. I recently learned something new. Did you know that Neil Armstrong did not say one small step for man, or he did not say one small step for mankind? He actually said, this is one small step for a man. He was talking about himself. He was talking to himself. He was taking one small step. Whilst we as a collective force need to solve for a sustainable climate, I need to play my part. You need to play your part. No abdication here. No we or us. We need to make sure it starts with us. Complete ownership for all that I use and what I need to return to the planet. I thought that was pretty good. Give it to Obama, anyone, if you know him. Once again, a big thank you to Old Mutual Limited for bringing this event to life as the Platinum Partner, and a massive thank you as well to our gold sponsor, ABSA, our silver sponsors, Umgeni Water, PwC, Exaro, Vodacom, and our bronze sponsors, EAS, Engine, Brand SA, and Nemesis Accounting. We are very grateful to have had such an overwhelming amount of support from these distinguished organizations. There is a live Twitter feed that will be running for today as well, and you will see it pop up at the bottom of the screen. The official hashtag you need to use is FOS 2022 and up your ES game. And let's get sustainability trending for the second day. There are prizes up for grabs, including a Sealand voucher to the value of 2,000 Rand and another one to the value of 1,000 Rand. You also stand a chance to win a breakaway weekend to Boschendal Wine Estate. We will be giving away 20 spec worms as well. Remember, they help to fight climate change and air pollution. So let's grow our own spec worm forests. And last but not least, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to win 2 Jenna Clifford teacups and an afternoon tea with the iconic jewelry designer herself, Jenna Clifford. The winners will be announced at the end of today's conference, and these will be given to the most engaged tweeters. Visit the virtual photo booth as well. Don't forget, click on the link that pops up in the chat feed and make sure you share your pictures on social media and tag us. Visit also the expo booth and take advantage of the networking function there. Loads of people to meet and make contacts. We also have the chat box available for questions, and we have some polls for you to answer today. Have a wonderful day, and from me, I want to hand over to the CEO of Topco Media, the creator of this amazing event. Over to you, Ralph.
Wow, and welcome back to day 2 of the Future of Sustainability Summit. And welcome and huge congrats again to Old Mutual. So yesterday we had some robust conversations with some huge names, so I'm sure you got to connect with them. And for me, what highlight was a massive talk from Sue Albright from the UN. Isn't it amazing the impact that women have made to sustainability and the economy? And I must really echo their data. Supporting woman-owned businesses is imperative and so productive. And I was also surprised with only 4% of companies having programs to support women businesses. This is certainly a big opportunity for positive change. So with over 6,250 delegates attending yesterday, this event is so important for us to use our voice and let the world know what is being discussed and shared. A movement starts with a voice, your voice. So let's collectively let people know we are all here. Get your phones out and share your badge with pride. Let's show our support for our host sponsor, Old Mutual. Let's stand up and celebrate. Huge thanks, Old Mutual. Yesterday, we felt your energy. In fact, Twitter was literally on fire. Hashtag FOS22 came in at 3rd most trending hashtag on Twitter. You know, what can we do today? It's really up to you. One of the questions we asked yesterday was, do you have access or do you know policymakers around sustainability? And if we really are going to accelerate sustainability, we need to find solutions to our current challenges. To get to net zero, we have to find 50% of the solutions that really help us get to the reality of a 2050. To accelerate this and reach our target, it's been identified 4 accelerators. Number 1, influence policy and politics. Quite simply, do you know of the policymakers in the different disciplines of sustainability? We need a unified approach to sustainability, not a fractured, siloed approach. Number 2, we need to turn plans into action. Yes, the magic word, action. As Peter Drucker famously said, execution eats strategy for breakfast. Number 3, we need to find and nurture innovations. We have 50% of the solutions to get to net zero by 2015. We need to innovate the other 50%. And fourthly, and quite importantly, all of this change, innovation, it requires investment. We need to grow the funding for our future. The program was packed yesterday, and it's packed again today. So if you enjoyed yesterday, you're going to absolutely love it today. It's not by chance that such an event like this is put together. And again, I really want to recognize a very special bunch of people. You please get behind me, and again thanking and celebrating the Topco team, the Old Mutual and ABSA team, as well as all our suppliers, partners and sponsors. Thank you very much. So thank you for that. We have, as usual, 2 gifts for you. Firstly, if you spend over 6 hours on the Hopin platform, you will be certified with the Future of Sustainability certificate to share with your colleagues and your friends. Secondly, we will be making this content available after the event if you missed some of the content. I know you're busy, I know you do have other things to do. So with networking at the core of the future of sustainability, we saw thousands of networking sessions. So the next person you could be in front of could be your next funder, partner, supplier, customer, employee or boss. So make sure you're networking today. Finally, if you are serious about driving change and think you have what it takes to be a change agent for sustainability, you may want to consider entering the Future of Sustainability Awards in 2023. Nothing sells like success. My final message is from a famous speech from JFK, and I wanted to put a slight twist in it. Ask not what the world or your country can do for you, but what you can do for a sustainable future. Enjoy. Thank you so much.
Once again, thank you so much, Ralph. Here to give us our opening address is Portia Bangerezako, Head of Sustainability at Old Mutual. Portia, over to you.
The World Economic Forum has identified extreme weather, climate action failure, and human-led environmental damage among the highest risks for humanity and our planet over the next decade. As a financial services intermediary, we recognize climate change as a systemic risk which must be integrated into the way in which we do business. We're a custodian of the lifetime savings and investments of millions of customers across Africa. Old Mutual, doing business and doing good.
Distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day 2 of the Old Mutual Future of Sustainability Summit. A sincere thanks to all the panelists and contributors from yesterday who helped us to steer the conversations in such a deliberate and engaging way. We have an incredible lineup today. I'm sure you are all as excited as I am to build on the momentum of yesterday. My name is Portia Bangerizako, and I am the head of sustainability at Old Mutual Limited. Yesterday, you heard from our CEO, Ian Williamson, who put forward a strong challenge of collaboration as a way of addressing our shared challenges and a way to also progress the sustainability agenda that creates shared value for all of our stakeholders. As an organization that has been around for 177 years, a very long time, we've seen a lot and have modeled for even more. If you name it, we have stress tested it. And that is the nature of financial services, to be prepared for any eventuality, for the eventuality of any anomaly. But often when anomalies are so personal as to impact one's life directly, like we are right now in stage 6, there is almost no scenario or response that makes sense in the moment. The last 2 years, living with a global pandemic has been exactly that for our customers, our colleagues, communities, families, and our friends. The riots and looting in July last year added further strain to the system. And then, as if that was not enough, we had extreme weather events earlier this year, serving to confirm the broader sustainability challenge that we face and that will require ongoing action from all of us here, from all of us here for years to come. More poignantly, we should not forget that it is our actions as human beings which in one way or another have contributed to these events, of which we know there is a strong likelihood of more to come. The devastating social and economic impacts of these developments have required an altogether different response from all players across the sectoral divide. A response that would finally begin to recognize the systemic interconnectedness between environmental, social, and governance systems, and deliver a more joined up and a more coordinated effort to address these. Could the players finally become organized and start working as a team to win this battle? Could something positive come of so much devastation and loss? As a dyed-in-wool sustainability practitioner, I would like to believe that these kind of questions have been constantly on my mind. And I would like to believe that the net positive future that we always crow on about is something you also think about. Unfortunately, I have neither complete answers nor comprehensive evidence that a net positive shift has happened. Is there still time to change my mind and give me the sense of completeness I long for? Well, you have all committed to being here to discuss some of the material issues we are still dealing with as a collective. And that for me is an incredibly positive sign. But let me be clear, I am holding a mirror up to myself here. The ball is firmly on our court. Bringing a measure of certainty to an extremely uncertain world is one of the promises we've built our business on as Old Mutual. The last 2 years have really tested our resolve to stay true to this promise to our stakeholders. These have stretched us in every way imaginable. In the last year, we paid out 21 billion in claims to our customers as part of this promise to support them in their time of need. Our short-term insurance business has been particularly impacted by the floods in KZN this year. And as at end of May, we have received over 2,200 claims with a net impact of between 100 and 150 million on our financials. This after reinsurance claims. The impact of climate change is being felt in real time, and a response that seeks to reduce its impact on both of our business and customers is something we as Old Mutual are prioritizing. The group manages around 1.3 trillion in funds on behalf of our customers who are increasingly concerned with how their money is being invested. And as such, responsible investing principles have become a priority for us. The notion of a just transition is just so important to us because of our position as a leading investor on the continent. You will hear from Nicole Martins from our investment group a bit later today on the work we're doing to steward the capital we manage towards a more renewable space to give investors real peace of mind that their funds are working for the greater good. In addressing the environmental impacts we will no doubt continue to face, we must continue to scale our collective efforts to address the social challenges that we share, such as poverty, inequality, jobs, and education. Why? Firstly, because it is the right thing to do, and no business can thrive in a society and environment which is failing. And because the communities who bear the brunt of these challenges represent our customer base, both current and future, they are where we draw our workforce, and they increasingly hold the power to determine the success or failure of our businesses. I am particularly proud of the partnerships we've already entered into in the last 2 years. These have enabled us to broaden the reach and scale of our response to the communities we serve. This includes, but not excluding others, this collaboration with the national and provincial health authorities to support the COVID-19 testing and vaccination efforts across the country. We also have strong working partnerships with the Department of Basic Education, civil society, and academia to address the major issue of learning loss because of COVID, especially for our matric classes. We also working with education authorities and a range of partners like Matric Live, Vele, and Second Chance Matric Program. This is done to mainstream financial education concepts into the school curriculum. And we do this in multiple languages, including Braille, and across multiple channels as well. This is part of our Learn, Think and Do program we've trialed in South Africa and Kenya and are looking to expand the reach in the coming years. During the pandemic, we made a concerted effort to broaden access to our financial education programs, reaching 22 million people in 2021 across the African continent. This, as we know, that people have been feeling the financial strain in many ways. Financial education forms the basis of the work we do in communities, and we believe in its power to transform society and create a pipeline for our business. So it's really an ongoing shared value exercise. We've partnered with the Department of Social Development and nonprofits like the Nelson Mandela and the Colin Mashawana Foundations, and we did this to bring relief to flood victims in KwaZulu-Natal. We've built a comprehensive SME, small medium enterprises support ecosystem, working in conjunction with a range of government and private sector stakeholders. This is an acknowledgement of the role that small businesses play as a conduit of job creation, safety nets, and sustained economic growth, which we really need. The group further drove empowerment and transformation in financial services sector through the sale of 21% of Old Mutual Investment Group's share to Future Growth to the African Women Chartered Accountants Investment Holdings. And recently, we announced our Bula Tsela, a Sesotho word for open the way. This deal is the first broad-based scheme in the insurance sector to include a retail scheme. Despite this progress, we know that more can and must be done. We are constantly being held to a higher standard by all our stakeholders. And to get a balancing act of consistently delivering shareholder value while addressing the material ESG issues that we face is not an easy process. The developments of the last 2 years have highlighted the urgent need for a stronger and more effective leadership, as well as a better collaboration between all social partners, especially government and business. I would go so far as to say that the only way we will break the poverty cycle and narrow the inequality gap is by working better together. And we need an enabling environment to achieve this. The truth is that the business sector cannot fully achieve its ESG goals without a restructured, business-friendly ecosystem, as well as an agile and responsive state. While I am encouraged by the conversations that started to address our energy mix across the spectrum, we do need more certainty at a policy level to bridge the supply gap, which I'm afraid, time is not on our side. Many of us have made commitments towards achieving the 2030 milestone of the Sustainable Development Goals. The evidence suggests we have actually gone backward in our pursuit of the SDGs, largely due to the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. With just over 8 years to go to 2030, remember, ladies and gentlemen, a 12-year-old will be 20 in 2030. We need to seek out more opportunities like this to engage, challenge, and agree on what we will jointly solve while growing in the process. Where will we be in 2030? And will the work that we're doing now be enough to sustain this beautiful continent and the projected 1.7 billion people that will call it home? The time is now for us to stop going at it alone and instead start going together. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day too. Back to you at the studio.
Thank you so much, Portia. A lot of the panel conversations have one thing in common. They speak to alignment, they speak to collaboration, they speak to synthesizing, understanding, and getting onto the same page about the initiatives we have to do. But that also is going to be heard in the next conversation, our very first fireside chat with youth. We'll be talking more about bridging sustainability's generational gap. Youth advocates drive sustainability, and they are going to be sharing with us in this discussion their view of the future and what it means around sustainability. They'll be looking at the toolkit for empowering ESG causes and inspiring collaboration between young people and more mature stakeholders. So I'm looking forward to this one, implementing policies and also looking at methods for change. So yeah, let's move over as I have a conversation with Ubongolethu and Chido. So Chido and Bonga, thank you so much for joining me. And Chido, I'm going to begin with you because I think at the heart of all our conversation is the work that the UN is doing to actually create a platform for young people to solve for the future. Tell me a little bit about your work with the UN and what it means for us, as what it means for young people going forward.
Thank you very much, Zanele, and such an honor to be part of this panel. So I'm currently the African Union Youth Envoy, working with a number of international organizations, including the United Nations. Specifically, I'll give an example. Currently in Paris, we have the Transformating Education Summit that's ongoing. And this is an event where they've brought together a number of policy leaders as well as youth activists to sit on the table and get to deliberate in terms of how we can transform the education sector, but to ensure that young people also have a voice and they're included when we have such conversations. So it's been quite interesting taking that role specifically as I represent the 55 member states in Africa as part of the African Union Chairperson's cabinet, but most importantly so to see how we can, look at working at a number of, challenges that the young people face with today and not operate in silos. So at the African Union specifically, we work with all the 55 member states in Africa, but within my portfolio representing the young people, I'm working with the young people in the 55 member states as well as the young people in the diaspora. In addition to this, working with the various international organizations, civil society groups as well, to see how we can have a bigger impact when we come together. So it's quite important, especially now leading up to the United Nations General Assembly meeting, which will be held in September, that we're starting to have these conversations now, and we're looking to how we can involve young people so that they can also be engaged on the decision-making table, which is, give an example as specifically right now with the Transforming Education Summit that's currently ongoing in Paris.
It's going to be great to unpack that a bit further. But this is on the back of a youth that is already in motion to solve for itself. Bongs, you are in there as an entrepreneur, as a young person. You are but an example of the energy and the focus that young people have to creating a sustainable but also a purpose-filled existence for themselves. What work are you doing, and how do you feel is the sentiment of young people as they contribute and build up to the greater work across the continent?
Yeah, so I lead Plug and Play Tech Center's sustainability ventures, and that is looking at opportunities to invest in clean tech solutions that are led by women founders and youth founders, ones that are directly linked to issues surrounding community. So we're looking at issues, for instance, around the waste value chain. We know that there are a lot of health complications that arise from the lack of proper waste management. We're also looking at solutions to help communities who live in areas that have been faced with a lot of issues around mining, extraction, and we're trying to work with large corporations as well to understand how can they reconfigure their services, their operations, to be a lot more intentional in where they come into work and how they work with communities. So that's what we're doing as Plug and Play. But I think, one of the issues that we still face as a youth, and one that I've also seen in my own experience, is underrepresentation. And underrepresentation meaning that, we sit at the table, but we don't have a voice at the table. So we can participate in the initial policy recommendations, we can participate in the initial case studies, but I've found that a lot of times it's very difficult when it comes time to ratify very key policy decisions. It's very difficult to get the youth voice past there. So I think that's the key level that we should be looking to pull on now. And it's one that I'm trying to pull on from the side of investment, in that we should be more intentional as investors as to where we invest and how we invest.
The first question the question that I really wanted to also ascertain from you is, where does that passion come from? You wanting to sit around the table, why? Why are you feeling that the voice of the youth is important? More important now for this topic, as it was for many other topics before. What is the thinking of young people when they are getting into the businesses that you are talking about, the funding that you are wanting to raise? What's motivating? Give me the case for young people in this space.
I mean, there's two cases there, right? So there's the one young people who is being pushed, so they face a lot of poverty, or in my case, 10 years ago, I was living in a township where we had an illegal dumping site right in front of us, and it became a really detrimental to the health around that community because the municipality didn't have capacity to deal with it. So we had to deal with it as a community. So as a young person, you are pushed into situations because either the previous generation didn't take it upon themselves to plan better, or because there wasn't anything or an opportunity earlier to integrate you into how to address it better. I mean, we have the integrated development plans at municipality level, but those are decided in council chambers, right? There is very little consultation with young people. So that's the push factor. And then the pull one, which came in later for me, moving into the space of investment and meeting a lot of founders, is that is knowing that there's a lot of opportunity when you are, I want to use the word without sounding like too much of a hippie, in sync. So understanding that we are part of an interconnected system of things. So there are human systems and ecological systems that work together. And young people are realizing now, if we are to preserve this planet, if we are to plan better for the future, we should design innovations that have that intact. So, I mean, a lot of people talk about ESG, but the key thing is just understanding the interconnectedness of all things. So whether that's in the business space or in the environmental space.
So beautifully put. I think we deal a little bit with the interconnected nature of things, be it technology, be it the manufacturing and the production, the localization of what we need. So many things are interconnected. What is interesting, though, to the last point that you mentioned, was that whilst young people are recognizing that nobody's going to give them a job, we didn't speak about that, but there are a lot of young people waiting to get work, and there isn't enough work for the number of young people that are entering the market. So they have to solve for themselves, and creating jobs in sustainability is absolutely the future because there's so many opportunities in that space across the continent. Does the UN recognize this in the work that you're doing? Do you recognize that a lot of the investment is not going to be a talk, just talking and raising awareness, and it's actually going to be empowering young people to solve for the environment while solving for themselves?
Specifically, when you look at the African Union, we have Agenda 2063 and Aspiration 6. And this Aspiration 6 talks about an Africa whose development shall rely on the potential of its people, especially the women and the youth. So already, because, we've been, when you look at the aspirations under Agenda 2063, that also tie in with, the Sustainable Development Goals for the UN. It shows that, their aspirations to ensure that young people are included, when we're making such decisions and we're looking at how they can be involved for impact for now and for the future. But I think it's also important that we zone into this towards on how we can meet, these aspirations in the shorter term as well as in the longer term. So this has been broken down to 10-year implementation plans for us to meet that Agenda 2063. But when we look at the 10-year implementation plans, we've also broken it down in terms of how within the African Union, working with the member states, we can have, initiatives that specifically target the young people. I'll give an example. Looking at my role as, being appointed the Special Envoy in Youth at the African Union, I'm the second Special Envoy in Youth, and this came about as a decision, that the United Nations, as a UN Youth Envoy, and with this decision, it came from the member states within Africa to say that within the governance structures in Africa, and specifically looking at the African Union, how can we ensure that we have a seat, that has been set aside, and this seat will be taken by a young person to be in the cabinet to ensure that whatever decisions are being made, young people are represented in those decisions. So, that also looks into, entrepreneurship, the issues to do with education, to do with employment, as well as to do with engagement, because I believe that when we look at, how we can resolve the challenges that are faced with young people, across the continent, it also has to start with the engagement in terms of how we engage them to form part of that solution. I also tend to believe that this should be a joint responsibility, not only relying on young people to solve these challenges themselves, but we need to work together, including with our leaders, including with different sectors, a multi-sectoral approach to ensure that we have the solutions for Africa. This is also taking into account that even when we look at the challenges, even in the economy faced across Africa generally, we've taken on a number of problems that we were not necessarily involved in terms of how that came about. So I think this should be an approach.
Yeah, let me just come in a bit, Shuda. Sorry, so you're running through quite a number of points, and I want to go back to just one of the ones you mentioned. You spoke about the involvement of youth and having youth representation as one of the solutions. But my challenge to that is that the decision makers are still the same decision makers before the young person came. And how much of a voice does one young person have, or two young people have, in a room of people who have one language that they've been speaking for a while? Same thing with women, is how are we rather changing policy or changing the way in which access is given to young people or to women for them to be able to participate meaningfully. So what's changing from a policy and a governance perspective instead of what sort of seems to be the visible, here's a young person representation, but yet there's not much of a voice, or policy or governance doesn't actually support it?
Okay, so in terms of what's changing in terms of a policy perspective, I'll give a few examples actually. When I bring it back to the context of Africa, and like I said, because I'm representing the African Union, a number of the head of states within Africa have appointed youth advisors as part of their cabinets. And this came about as a part of lobbying to say that, within the policies and the structures, when you look at national level, how can we ensure that there's a cohort of young people that are also involved at that policy decision-making level? I'll give an example of Namibia. Namibia was the first to appoint a youth presidential advisor, specifically focusing on entrepreneurship and enterprising development. Her name is Desiree Matthews.
Bonga, are you comfortable to weigh in on the conversation around accessing opportunities for young people and how easy that is? And maybe speak again to what you mentioned earlier around the voice of young people whilst it's invited, not being heard. Your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of challenges with young people accessing opportunity, and I'll speak in the space of startups, Africa is in a really great position right now. There's a lot of capital and a lot of opportunity coming to the continent. Last year, African startups raised over $4 billion, which is amazing. But when you really scrutinize that, you find that a lot of the money that's channeled is not necessarily going to key priority areas that youth are working in. So a lot of it is going to the fintech sector, which is mostly platform-based solutions that don't offer a lot of new job opportunities. You find that not a lot of money is going into edtech, not a lot of money is going into training and development on the continent. So those are key things that we should start looking at in terms of being able to give youth access. Also, you find a lot of young people are still predominantly not in urban areas. I know that we've been saying that there's this huge urban sprawl, but there's still young people in quite remote and rural areas. And there's still a question of those young people maybe are participating in agricultural entrepreneurship. There's not a lot of funding for that. So I think the biggest challenge, while there is financing available, it's just that there isn't financing in key segments where young people are. And also young people aren't investor ready, both on the education side, but also on the type of solutions that they have right now. So that also then speaks to, we have the seat at the table, but no voice. It's like, being able to, for instance, a couple of years ago, I was part of an advisory panel, and I used to speak a lot to higher level or engage a lot of people in high level policy development. But then I found that a lot of times our recommendations are great to look at when it comes to sending out communications or on the website, But when it comes to the real internal issues, navigating around policy, we're not included in that. Maybe it's because we aren't ready for some conversations. You mentioned something about language in certain rooms. There's already a culture and language that's been cultivated for years. So young people aren't, we don't speak the same as more mature generations. You find that we're more impatient. We have an 8-second attention span, and we're quick to call things out. And maybe the generation before us is a bit more diplomatic, a bit more slower, and that's where the clash then starts, which is why you find that a lot of the times youth voices are invited but not given the platform to speak.
And it's two things, and youth get tired of not being heard, and they check out and they go find other ways because they still have to live, and it feels like they're not making progress. But Chido, I know that there are institutions in the continent. I think the Ghana Bank, I don't know, you'll tell me, I'll remember which one it is, where they actually are changing how they're engaging with entrepreneurs, young women. Do you have other examples of changes on the ground that are trying to make things easier for young people and for women?
Okay, sure. I think, there are a number of examples that I could bring to mind when it comes to this. And I think I do agree, though, with Bongo that we still have a very long way to go in terms of providing that access. But we can acknowledge, the few tips that have been taken in this regard. So one of the examples that I can offer is in terms of, inclusion when it comes to finance and, having access in terms of funding when it comes to the youth funds and the youth hubs that are currently going on in Ghana as well as in Kenya. Not only that, but the African Development Bank specifically is actually in the process where they have announced that they'll be rolling out funding for young people, and specifically with this, working with member states to ensure that these banks will be youth-led and will be favorable towards young people in terms of access to the credit and the terms that will be available.
And Chido, it's actually Access Bank that I was thinking of, that was part of the Africa Development Bank's funding of young people and young people's projects. And what's interesting, Bongo, is that, for example, in Ghana, in I think it's also in Cameroon, they actually are focusing on agriculture, on manufacturing, on, of course, on technology. Where else do you think, in South Africa, perhaps, in other places, we need to be channeling the focus of where investment is required for young people?
I mean, we need to take a step back as well and look at some of the other broader opportunities that are opening up in Africa. So there's the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which is hopefully going to stimulate intra-Africa trade and economic activity. And I think one of the key things that's needed there, because this is something that's happened when it comes to tech in Africa, we came into tech and we focused a lot on the fintech sector because a lot of money was directed there. And I think we should look at what are the key industries that countries can provide in and are strong on. So I know a lot of West African countries are quite strong in textiles and manufacturing. How can we empower youth in there, and how can the African Development Bank's newly created a vehicle now for youth target those youth in those areas? So I think we need to be very intentional about mapping this at a macro scale, looking at the continent as where are the key economic sectors in each country, how can youth play a role in there? Because if we look at, for instance, South Africa used to be very strong in automotive, manufacturing, but those industries are dying out now, and we're being left behind. And if, for instance, now we're shifting more to platform-based innovation, it's going to be very difficult for us to operate in an Africa market where you have mature markets in those senses, such as West Africa, Nigeria, or Kenya.
Thank you so much. Chido, I don't want to give you another question, but I want to ask you, what else do you think is important to throw into this fireside chat from your side?
Okay, sure. If you may allow me, Zanele, I'll give an additional example of Burundi. So it's interesting enough that, I recently visited Burundi and engaged with the young people that are on the ground. And they actually have a number of young people that are based in the rural areas and migration from urban to rural that are investing in agriculture. And they also have youth cooperatives, which is something that has been led by the government, where they form youth cooperatives for young people to get involved in agriculture. So I think it's very important that, we look at best practices, but most importantly, as young people, we come together in terms of making a better impact on our continent and how we can work together for impact.
Well, I think I appreciate the work that you're doing to represent, to share the representation across so many different platforms. It's not an easy one to do. How are you feeling? Do you feel that you're making progress? Do you feel empowered, through the work of the African Union and across the continent? Is it exciting to sit on the precipice of this change for young people and for women?
I think it's a huge responsibility, honestly, because I know every young person is really looking up to me to ensure that